All right, it's Wednesday night, and we're going to have our usual night to some extent, but then we do have conference, obviously. And this is a nice little crowd for conference. I like it. Nice crowd. Should I preach an evangelical message?
Go ahead.
It's kind of cool.
Do it.
Take an offering.
Yeah.
I'm glad to have anybody, anytime they can come. We'll do our usual prayer list and go through that. And for the prayer list, we'll have a volunteer editor-in-chief. Last week, Mrs. Richardson did it, so we might want to give her a break. Did somebody raise their hand? Raise your hand if you're sure. Okay. All right, Miss Abby's going to do it.
I volunteered it.
So the duties are that we edit this and revise it as we go along, and then you have to turn it into the church secretary if that's okay. Because you hand it to me, who knows what can happen between here and there. I'm going up there, but by the time I get there, lots of things happen. Kids and, who knows what. So our prayer list tonight is purple. I think that's nice. Like to keep us guessing. All right, so, let's open in prayer if we could. We've got a lot to go over tonight. Let's pray over our meeting. Lord, we thank you for this time together. I pray that you would help it to be productive in every way. And as always, Lord, I pray that you would open our eyes tonight as we look at your word. And I pray that you would help us to think clearly through our teaching and through our conference. We ask you these things in Christ's name. Amen. All righty, I'll open it up. I got some visitors here tonight. This is Mr. and Mrs. Colton Post. Strange, isn't it? Colton is a former teen of ours at Pleasant Hill. And first time I saw Colton, he didn't look quite like he does now. And he was a non-converted, rebellious teenager. And he has been genuinely converted, the evidence being that his life has changed completely. And Colton was probably not raised quite like some of us might have been in certain ways. And no reason to go to church whatsoever, and he came and he kept coming. And I remember going to him one night. I don't know if he remembers. Like, dude, why are you coming? And I knew the reason. He was getting something there that he didn't get maybe anywhere else. So good to have him and his new bride of 2 weeks, 2.5 or 1.5. Yeah, 2.5. Dude, you better know now. You know what I'm saying? Okay, good. Well, less than a month. So good to have you guys. Colton shares my passion for apologetics. So he texted me yesterday and I said, hey, we're doing apologetics. He was like, all right, I'll be there. So, basically that email. All right, well, let's move on with our prayer list, if we could. And does anybody have anything as we look over this to add or take away? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Okay. Nita Lowry, about the 4th name down. 5-hour surgery. Okay. Mm. Okay.
In addition to that, she
Yes, sir.
shared with us yesterday, on here we say receiving radiation.
Mm-hmm.
Her doctor told her she was cancer-free yesterday.
Wow, cancer-free. Okay. So Nita Lowry with a 5-hour surgery seemed to come through it pretty well, and she is cancer-free. That's about the 4th name down under special request. Did we get that right? Recovering from surgery. Can we do that? Sounds great. That's good. Anybody else? Brianna Johns, I guess, still improving, ever so slowly, I guess, but improving nonetheless. So that's good. I still have I guess we can put him on this list, if that's okay, under special request. A friend of mine that I coached with, he coached Adam. He and I coached one of Adam's teams. He was in a car accident, I guess last Wednesday or Tuesday. I think I mentioned this last Wednesday, but I didn't put him on the list. Is it? Jason Miller. Okay, we did. Okay, good. Jason basically had his whole face crushed. I don't know details as far as seatbelt, or I know he had an old pickup that didn't have an airbag and all that stuff, but both eye sockets are crushed, his nose is crushed, his cheekbones are crushed. I think he has a fracture in his forehead. His jaw's broken. He's going to be drinking from a straw for a long time. They had to put plates under his eyeballs to keep them in place because all that was just so destroyed. So he's a pretty young guy. He's 40 or 41, about my age, I guess, and kids and all that good stuff. So he'll be out of work for a long time and recovering for a long time. So just keep him in prayers. I guess at this point it's infections and all that they've got to worry about with all the staples and wires and cuts and whatnot. So, and I'll keep you guys updated on him as I get those updates. Anybody else? I know this sounds very routine, but our country, the Republican Party, or Democratic, if you're voting democratically, they're both messed up. So they're both rigged, apparently. So who knows? Be a good time for Jesus or the Antichrist. Think about it. Europe's messed up. Now we, the leaders, are messed up. And most of the rest of the world has been messed up, and now we're right there with them. It'd be a good time for somebody with all the answers to step in and say, you know what, I got this. I got all of it. So, I'm good either way. I'm going either way. I don't care what it is. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Cool. Okay. Amanda Carter is looking to close on a house. Awesome. Hope it goes well. Good. Nerve-wracking, isn't it? Goodness. All right, Amanda Carter looking to close on a house, and by this time next week we'll know, hopefully. Good. Good. Anybody else?
Yeah, I got a buddy of mine, William Miller, real good friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
April the 19th coming up will be his 1 year of being a born again believer. And let's just say special prayer request for him because the devil is on him very, very hard. So he needs prayer this week.
Yep.
An enormous amount of pressure.
And that is why discipleship is so important, especially those first few years. You know about that. You have to get new friends. I mean, you don't disown your other ones and never, but you can't keep doing what you've been doing. That's tough. Anybody else? Anybody we need to add or take away? I'm looking through, I can't. Any update on I think this is your former pastor's daughter, Jackie Adair? Is that who that is? Or wife? Mom. Oh, okay. Any update at all? Anybody know?
The last time I heard, she was doing very well.
Okay.
I think all of her tests were coming back very good.
Okay. I had a pastor in the local area today just call me and just reach out and just say, hey, we know who you are, we know your church, and we're praying for you, and he offered to take me to lunch and get to know me and do what pastors do best, eat. And, kind of an ally in our area. So that was very, it's very, it's humbling when somebody calls you and there's no agenda, hopefully, better not be. And they're just saying, we're here to help you guys if we can. It's very generous when somebody does that. Take that very serious. All right, anybody else? No? All right, Brother Roger, would you pray over our folks tonight in our list? Thank you.
Our Father God, we just want to come to you tonight, dear God, just to lift you up, Heavenly Father, and lift all the people that have been mentioned and that are sick and shut in. They have various illnesses, dear God. We just want to lift all of them up. I pray, dear God, that you would just be with this church, dear Heavenly Father, that you would help us to continue to be in unity, Heavenly Father. Be with us during the services tonight in our business. In Christ's name we ask you. Amen.
Amen. All right, so I'm going to put my purple paper down. Pick up my other white one. We've got lots of handouts tonight. And I'm mindful of the time. We won't rush per se, but there's not a lot to cover either tonight. It's kind of a review from the last 2 weeks with a little bit added on. And then at 8 sharp, hopefully, we've got a meeting, the leadership team in the back. We're trying to figure out the details of our next secretary and her role here and her job description and all those little details, you know, all money, all that stuff. So we needed to meet tonight, or we would have been meeting on a Sunday night or another night during the week and taking us away from our families. So don't be upset. That's my fault. I have requested that for Wednesday night. And we got to do that at 8 o'clock. And then in between that, I want to go over this for a minute and then give ample time for our conference as well. So with that being said, if you would, go to Romans chapter 2. And I'm going to read our verses that we're basing this moral argument on. And then we'll kind of go through this moral argument again with a little bit added. In the next few weeks, we're going to go over objections to the moral argument. So we can learn our side, but to some extent we learn the other side. So in other words, what are you going to hear if you present this as an argument for the existence of God? Okay? So Romans chapter 2, verse 14 and 15 says this. And Romans, by the way, is if you have a good study time that you do, you know, and every night basically there's time you spend in the Word, and you ever come across those times where it's flat and it's dead and you're bored and you don't want to read, or you don't know what to read. Romans is a fantastic place to just, you know, some people open their Bible, let the wind blow or whatever. You know, I don't. I intentionally look for things. Romans, there's not a doctrine in the New Testament that cannot be found in Romans. So this is a great place to start. So Romans chapter 2, verse 14 says this. For when the Gentiles who do not have the law, speaking of the Word, Bible, the Old Testament at that time, by nature do things in the law, these, although not having the law, are a law to themselves. Okay, verse 15. Who show the work of the law written in their hearts. That's their whole being, in a sense. Their will, their emotions, their all of it. Their conscience. Does anybody remember what that word means? Word studies are fantastic, by the way. Conscience. I know we don't speak Greek and Latin, I guess. I don't speak Latin. But this is a Latin word. What does con mean? Con. C-O-N. With. Convict. With a conviction. You ever thought about that? Con, science. With knowledge. Okay? That's all that means. Conscience. So these not having a law or a law to themselves who show the work of the Bible. They show the work of the Bible written in their hearts. We know the heart, not speaking of the thing that pumps blood here, speaking of much more. Their conscience also bearing witness, and between themselves their thoughts accusing or else excusing them. And I think in the King James it says one another, which I like even better there. Excusing or accusing one another. It's interesting. That's exactly what is going on now. So you got the CEO of Apple who is angry. You got a rock star from the 80s, Bruce Springsteen. Some of you guys know him well. I won't sing any of his stuff. You might start singing it with me, and we'll feel like pagans. Because we are. No, we're not. We're believers. Former pagans. And by the way, my comment about a child, what I don't know what I called the kid that screamed. Degenerate. Unregenerate. Well, you know, an unregenerate child doesn't want to sit in church. So, nobody fussed at me for it, but apparently it was very funny. But it's true. Anyway. So Bruce Springsteen is upset, and he's canceling his show in North Carolina. So he made it, I think it's a contract even. They signed deals to play in cities. Okay? And he comes in and says, I'll play in the city, and then they pass a law protecting us from having to do things with the LGBT community that we don't want to do. And then what does he do? Because he's angry at discrimination. So what does he do? He discriminates.
But
I just
not in
think that's
Syria,
hilarious.
because he's still gonna play in Syria where they kill people, so.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, just like Apple, they'll sell phones to people in Syria where they kill homosexuals, but they're angry with us because we don't want to bake a cake for a couple, so we're going to boycott America, but we'll keep selling over here where they do much worse than refuse to bake cakes for them. So anyway, you know, their conscience is, I don't know, seared maybe, who knows. Okay, so let's review the moral argument. This is what it says, very simply. This is these are logical steps that we take. If you haven't been here ever on Wednesday night or haven't been in a while, when we say argument, we're not saying we are fussing and yelling with or at anybody about God stuff. I don't mean that irreverently. But we're not. We say argument from a philosophical point of view that it is just your explanation for what you believe and why you believe it. And remember, we go back to 1 Peter 3:15, I think it is. Be ready to give an answer, an apologia. That's the Greek word, which means a defense. So now we're looking into our Christian faith, and we're looking at practical, biblical evidence for what we believe, non-biblical evidence, which is fine, for what we believe historically, geographically. We're going to get all that good stuff, scientifically, medically. It really will blow your mind as you learn some of the stuff like it does mine, and I can attest. We should not be ashamed of what we believe. We have so much evidence on our side. And people make us feel dumb and narrow-minded as if it's a superstitious belief and there's nothing credible about our religion. Not true. Not true. It is the most credible religion. Our Bible is the most credible book historically of any literature, not Bibles, any literature. It is the oldest, most documented book ever. I think that's really cool. So here's the moral argument for God. And if you're new, what we're saying is, if somebody says, forget Christianity, they're just saying theism. I don't believe there is a God. So in your mind, you want to go to them and logically and intelligently give them evidence to at least say, okay, I get where you're coming from. Maybe there is a God. This is one of them. We've had 3 before this. We won't review those tonight. We've got to hurry. But the moral argument says this. If God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. Okay, what are objective moral values? What's objective? Not subjective. What's subjective?
Based on personal feelings.
Oh, yeah, based on personal feelings. Okay, feelings are good, but they can't run your life. Faith does. And when emotions are attached to faith, that's a good thing. If your emotions precede your faith, that's a bad thing. Faith, then emotions. We preachers sometimes demonize the emotions. They're not bad, they just got to be in order. Got to be in the right order. Oh, okay, so if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. And then we point to objective moral values do exist. The evidence being the morality found in all civilizations and in virtually all people. What do I mean by that? Anybody? Evidence. What now? It's order. What kind of order though?
Like, even in tribes and
Yep.
they'll have
Codes. Right. Prisons have codes. I don't mean this to be funny. Anybody's ever done jail time, I'm not trying to, but this guy that has worked for me over the last few years, I haven't seen him in 5 months. The last time I corresponded with him, I was asking him to go to work with me in November. And no answer. So I'm like, well, whatever, So he calls the other day, he's like, hey, I'm back. I'm back? Back from where? I said, well, where have you been? I've been kind of out of pocket. So I picked him up, we're working. And he's not a violent criminal, but he is a criminal, apparently. And he's like, well, now this is very uncomfortable. You're driving down the road, and you picked him up, so there's no turning back necessarily. And you're going down the road, and I'm like, well, hey, man, where have you been? I did some time in 3 different prisons in the last 5 months. Like, do you ask for what? You asked him? So yeah, I didn't. He told me anyway, and it wasn't violent, it was just breaking probation and whatnot. But long story short, he even included me. I started asking him about prison life. You know, I mean, what else do you talk about when your worker has been in prison for 5 months? So I said, well, what's it like? And he's like, well, man, you know, you get beat up if you don't do this. And they give you a list, okay, of about 20 things when you walk into this prison in Jackson, Georgia or Mississippi, I don't remember which. And is it Georgia? And it's a pretty rough one, I think. I don't know what he's doing there. Anyway, I won't say that part. I have to filter things, especially up here. So they give him 20 things to do and not to do. You know, in other words, you don't walk through certain areas disrespectfully, or they'll shank you. You know what that means? Homemade knife? You'll get killed. But what do you mean walk disrespectfully? What does that mean? Well, you don't come through there all cocky because that's their territory. And I said, you know what's interesting? It's a bunch of unruly people who don't believe in the law, and you put them all together in a prison, and what's the first thing they do? They have a law. Isn't that interesting? That's what Romans 2 is saying. You can't get away from it. Even if you're a psychopath, there's some kind of code. Even if your conscience has been seared and you really no longer believe in right and wrong, which can happen. The Bible says it can happen, and then you're capable of anything with no remorse or guilt. Those are the kind of people that pass a lie detector test because their body doesn't react to them lying to you because it just isn't wrong to them anymore. So you put them all together and they come up with a moral code. I think that's interesting. And it's interesting, he also told me, I said, did you see anybody get shanked? And he's like, yeah, some 20-something-year-old come in, and his reputation, when he came in, he was known to be an abuser of children. And he said his third day there, he got it. They didn't kill him, but they tried. And I thought, well, that's interesting to me. They have I kind of respect that code. You know, if we did more of that, then there would be less of that. But we don't, so there's not. Okay, so if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. Objective moral values, which means absolute truths and codes. Objective moral values do exist. Therefore, point 3, God exists. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so we'll go to the objection. But I wanted to, in case it doesn't make sense, I wanted to relate it. And I was picturing when I studied standing here, and I thought, this is what you want to do in apologetics. Don't reach way out to where they can't grasp what you're saying. Look around you like Jesus used to do when he taught, and he would find an example around him. So I thought, let me illustrate this argument with this building. Number 1, if all the power has been cut off to this building, the lights will not come on. Is that a logical statement? Okay. The lights are on and working, the evidence being the light itself. Therefore, all the power to this building has not been cut off. Does that make sense? So, you're in a building, and this is just as ridiculous as arguing against the moral code. It would be somebody, well, look, there's power in this building. Well, I don't understand power. I'm not an electrician. I don't know that there's power here. And we'll say, well, there's lights. And it's powered somehow. Solar panels, we don't have those. So you have to explain light in here to me. Well, I don't know, it just happens. No, it doesn't just happen. I can show you wires in the walls if we rip the walls down, and switches and connections and fuse boxes. And I don't know electricity well, but I know that something goes through those wires to the switch and to the lights, and it makes it all work. And they say, well, I don't agree with your assessment. I don't think electricity powers these lights. And you say, okay, fine, but they are on. You understand what I mean? And you do have to explain that to me. I'm explaining it through electricity. How are you going to explain it? I was called in I shouldn't have done this, but it's probably 2 years ago, I watched a partial documentary on monarch butterflies. Y'all seen it? It's kind of new. It's unbelievable. Monarch butterflies, how far they travel. So I watched it, and it's amazing. It is intelligent design. It is God, but it's design and intent and purpose. And underneath, I wasn't trying to be facetious or start a fight. I just said, under the video, and I usually don't comment under anything, but I just said, looks like purpose and intent to me, or whatever. 2 years later, dude comments, comes through my email. I don't know how that happened. I didn't do it. But I got an email and it said, if you're going to explain everything you don't understand with superstition, then you're not going to further knowledge for anybody. Do you understand that phrase? I had to think about it. on the lawnmower. Hey, what does he mean by that? Because I'm going to answer him. So I got nothing better to do, 2 jobs, a wife and 3 kids. I got time. And I was like, well, but I am, because that's illogical. If you're going to explain everything you don't understand with superstition, then in other words, you're killing knowledge. We can't progress as a country with people like you. That's what that means. So I thought, wait a minute. If you tell me that everything around here has no origin and is accidental, you tell me who's stopping knowledge. And point number 2, do y'all know that most of the first scientists we ever had as a country were either theists or Christians? They believed in God. Do you know why they furthered knowledge? Because according to what they read in the Bible and their logical conclusions of there being a God, they knew that there were reasons for what they saw. They investigated them, and it became science. Science doesn't create anything. It discovers stuff. So I answered back. I hadn't heard back. I hope I don't. But if anything will stifle knowledge, it is you telling your kids, you're an accident, you shouldn't be here, but you are. It's years and years and years of evolution. Why would I ever go outside with any awe whatsoever if this is all accidental? I go outside and look up and I'm in awe because it's intentional. Does that make sense? Okay, so here's an objection to our argument. Is everybody understanding our argument? We have objective moral values because there is a God. And if you don't have a God, you can't explain objective moral values because we're all accidental. Okay? That's what Hitler believed. So, atheists can and are moral without believing in God. This is the objection. Atheists can be and are moral without believing in God. Therefore, religion is not necessary. Do y'all understand that argument? Seriously, all of you really understand that? Because that's hard.
It just doesn't make sense. I mean, I understand what they're saying.
Right, it takes a while to...
It just doesn't compute. It just doesn't.
An atheist is saying, okay, we're saying if there is no God, there can't be moral absolutes. And they answer back and say, I have moral absolutes, and I don't believe in God. Does that make sense?
Well, did our moral absolute, or they say we don't believe in God,
But they still have them.
But since we evolved, have they gotten better, or way back then, where they're not as new? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know that they would articulate either way. They're saying Christians aren't the only ones that are moral. Non-Christians and atheists are. So we're doing the right thing without a God, and you say you have to have a God to do the right thing. But and this argument never says you can't be moral without believing in God. The argument says, why would you be moral unless you believe in God? Y'all see the difference?
Yes.
There's a huge difference. This is always the pushback that you get when you present the moral argument. All they hear, they're offended and they hear, so you're saying atheists can't be moral? No. I know atheists can be moral. I'm saying an atheist shouldn't be.
Why are you moral?
Why are you moral? And they will say, well, I don't need a God to justify this. I'm moral without believing in God. Now, what would your answer to that be? Does that go against what we're saying at all? Does it?
Somebody told them right and wrong. They got it somewhere.
Exactly. So they're going to start going back. Where
Did they get their standard for their morals?
Well, we're going to go over this next week, but it's called cultural relativism. Their culture taught that to them. But what's the problem with that? Remember, you got to push back and keep going backwards. Okay, if I tell you I'm an atheist and you say, well, you can't have morality if you have no God. And like one guy says in a book, you're stealing words from theism when you even use the word good. Okay, Bruce Springsteen, he's angry because a standard or conviction has been offended. How does he have a conviction if there is no God? Why can't I go kill every non-believer in this country if there's no God? And that's what ISIS wants to do. Why can't I? I'm not offending anybody. I'm not offending God. And I'm stronger than you, then tough luck.
Like, we follow one set of standards because God gave it to us. But they don't, I mean, they don't have us. So,
Hmm.
there could be something different. Standards.
Cultures.
Yeah, exactly.
But among all the different cultures, let's go back to our first point. Are there, by and large, objective moral values in every culture? Forget religions.
Well, yeah, they take care of their elders and the babies.
And usually they don't kill people. Most people don't think it's okay to kill people. Or still, bravery is honorable in every culture. Selflessness is honorable in every culture. It's getting to where it's not in ours as much. It's looked at as weakness. But traditionally, selflessness is honorable, and arrogance and pride is hated. How do we explain it? So when an atheist says, I can be moral without God, I don't need to believe in God to be moral. And we say, well, why would you be moral if there is no God? Make them explain what good means if there is no God. Because if there's no lawgiver, remember? If there's no lawgiver, there is no good or evil. A lot of people's biggest problem with Christianity is that evil exists. And you go back and you say, dude, if there's no God, what's evil? What does that even mean? And why do you prefer good over evil if you're an accident? All of that is not explained. Okay, so here's what they're saying. Christians claim we need Christianity to tell everyone else what is right and wrong. But I'm not a Christian, and I still understand that acts such as murder are wrong. How would you answer that? Because that is true, and that's affirming something that this book says. And I just read it. But no, they're saying, yeah, I'm not a Christian, and I still understand that acts such as murder are wrong. Well, we say according to Romans 2:14, for when the Gentiles, non-believer, who do not have the law, I don't have to have the law to know what right and wrong is, okay, by nature, by birth, do the things in the law, these also not having the law are a law to themselves. So when they tell you, I know right from wrong and I don't believe in God, they're actually affirming Romans chapter 2. And you say, you're right. Right here it says that people before the law that didn't have the law still did right and wrong. They knew right and wrong, and by and large they acted rightly about a lot of things. They're just affirming what our scriptures say. We never said that only a believer or a theist can be moral. We're saying the opposite. Everybody knows morality. It's written on their hearts from God from birth. And if it isn't written on our hearts from God from birth, then explain why civilizations all over the world, for all of recorded history, have had a moral code. I'm telling you, that is, in my opinion, that is the most irrefutable argument that I have ever heard from the four arguments. I love all four. I love them. This one right here, because the only alternative, and we'll go over it next week, the only alternative is relativism, which is subjective. We think murder's wrong, but maybe not everybody does. Well, then, so there's no God? Well, no, it's all evolution. Well, how did we evolve and even last if murder wasn't wrong in the beginning? When did this start? And have our morals evolved? Because we can look at our country and say our morals are actually devolving. They're degenerate. Does this make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Does anybody have any comments? Could you sit down with a hostile atheist and gently and calmly and lovingly talk them through something like this?
Not yet. Gonna take a minute.
But if you walk out of here tonight, how could we get you to where you could? I know you can't get into the intricacies of this, but in a very basic way. And by the way, if you go home and read it yourself and then study it and then watch videos of people debating, it's very helpful. Ravi Zacharias is my favorite. His favorite is William Lane Craig, I think. No? Yeah. Craig's a little bit drier. Ravi's very, very passionate. But how, I try to give you one with a building. How would you? And maybe we'll do this next week. We'll have a mock conversation.
If nothing else, because I work with two professing atheists right now.
Awesome.
I have been listening to their conversations in just everyday And I have to laugh a little bit at them because I hear them say, man, I can't believe you did that. That is so wrong. And I'm going to say,
What is wrong?
what do you mean? Why do you care?
That's where you start. What does wrong mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've never paid attention to that until we started going over this.
They can't have that word. That is our word as theists.
Right.
And by theist, I mean somebody who believes in God. And obviously, we're Christians, which is another step, specifically Christian and not just theist. They can't have that word. So listen out for key words like, man, my boss, they shorted me on my check. Why can't he short you on your check? Well, that's wrong. Well, what does that mean? What does wrong mean? Because wrong to me means there's an injustice.
There's a guideline somewhere.
But injustice demands a law. See, you start going back. Injustice demands a law, and a law demands a lawgiver. And that goes back to the first argument, cause and effect. How can you have an effect without a cause? You can't do it. Whether you're a theist or an atheist, the cause was either God or the cause was the Big Bang. It all goes back to a beginning. Even atheist scientists are now finally admitting, okay, there's a beginning. We don't know what it was. We won't give God credit, but this thing did have a beginning. Well, their answer to that is we haven't lived long enough to see it because the evolution is so stretched out. We haven't had enough time to watch a monkey. But the better argument against that is why have we never found a fossil that was part monkey, part man? Because in some of you seasoned saints books, textbooks, you guys had things like the Piltdown Man, Nebraska Man. Y'all remember them? They've all either been proven to be a hoax or a mistake. Did you know that? Every one of them. Every transitional half monkey, half man they've ever found has been proven to be a mistake, or actually some of them are an intentional hoax. Did y'all know that? Did y'all know some of them are still in textbooks? 30, 40 years later after we know they're hoax. Did you know that, what's the embryos? I have to get in that later. Still in textbooks and we know it was a hoax. Go figure that one. I have no idea. So yeah, look for key words with a moral argument. Okay, I think the most simple argument is the moral. If there is a law, and if you say right and wrong, then there has to be a law, or you have no right and wrong. And how do you explain the law without a lawgiver? Society is not the lawgiver. Can't be. You can't. I can't accept that logically. And they may go back to, well, somebody somewhere along the way decided this was good for us, so they just instituted it and we kept evolving. But that goes against evolution, because evolution says might makes right and the strong will survive. So why would I, who owns everything, let another group of people come along and say, it is good for me that you exist and take my hunting land? No. I'm going to kill you because you're in my area. But that's not what we did. Everybody thinks the Native Americans just killed each other for fun for thousands of years, but they didn't. They actually lived most of the time very peacefully, for the most part, near each other, till we came along. Gave things like the flute and stuff like that. Any questions or comments? It's 7:40. We got a couple minutes for questions and comments. Anybody? Please. Colton?
I really like the lights argument. That's really good.
You like which?
The example you gave of the lights, that's great. It's like a great guideline.
Yeah, illustration. Yeah, I mean.
Illustration.
But that just takes you meditating on these thoughts and what you read. Because all this does, it comes very slowly for me. Apologetics. And anything that requires a lot of thinking comes slow to me. But well, I mean, we got time. What else you got?
If and you just brought up something just a minute ago. If we know that, I don't know how that's going to come into an argument, but we know that we have a soul. Animals do not. And if they're learned, that's what everybody says, what the atheists are saying, that maybe we have learned from our mistakes, therefore that's the reason the strong survive.
Mm-hmm.
But how come in the animal kingdom there's always a challenge for that over and over again? But yet as humans, we don't challenge that. We just, okay, this is right and this is wrong. Does that, you know what I'm saying? It's like-
Kind of.
Yeah.
You mean an animal?
Yeah, an animal is constantly, there's always a competition for to be the king.
Right,
To be the king, okay? I don't, even though you may be the king, I want that, okay?
right.
But now, humans, if there is no right and wrong, why are we just okay with the right and the wrong? I mean, why would we constantly challenge that over and over again?
Yeah, well, there's a video I'm gonna show you guys, and it talks about that, and it shows a, not a real cat, it's a cartoon. A cat has a mouse in his mouth, and it says, why doesn't it bother the cat that he's killed the mouse? Well, he's doing what he knows. He's designed to do that. He has to eat it. You know, why aren't we killing each other and eating? You know, yeah, there's, and somebody posts on the, you know, I keep seeing this thing about canine dogs. Do you believe if somebody shoots a canine, they should be judged and tried like if they shot a cop? Well, of course not. It's a dog. And I love dogs. But that's unbiblical. That's an unbiblical thought to put a dog on the level as a human. You know, that's just, they're not. It's an unhealthy appreciation for animals. Dog. I love that we have a dog, but that dog does not have a soul. And he will die. And that's why if you saw a dog get ran over, hopefully it has a different effect than if you saw, God forbid, a human being get ran over. I would hate to see an animal hurt or get ran over, but if a human being gets ran over in front of me, I'm never going to forget that. I'll forget the dog. I'm not going to forget the human. And that they have to explain that. There's something deeper there, the soul. So yeah, good one. Anybody else? Is this interesting? I love it. I love this stuff. All right, well, let's wrap this up. If we're sure we're good, and we'll move on next week to objections to the moral argument. So let's pray. Lord, thank you again for your word, and thank you for Romans and all the word, Lord, all the Bible. But I pray that you would give us an appetite for the word and for things related to the word, so that we become, for lack of a better word, Lord, obsessed with the Bible and with thoughts of you, so that we learn more about you and so that we can explain our faith better. We ask all these things in Christ's name.